Hey, we finally have Coach Harris in the studio. Let's go. Oh my gosh.
Hey.
Yeah, so.
Wait, no, restart.
What'd you do? What'd you do? Bro,
Sorry,
that was flush.
Sorry.
All right, we'll restart.
Sorry, I had to hold in a burp.
We'll run it back. Thank you, Ken.
I had to hold in a burp. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. Well, we finally have Coach Harris in the studio. Oh my gosh, this has been a long-awaited interview. I've heard a ton about you, and I just cannot wait to find out all the little gold nuggets. So, one thing I want to start with is that you actually went through a 9-month hiring process with the Secret Service. What was that like?
Yeah, so that's kind of my interesting fact, my party story.
For sure.
I didn't sign an NDA, so I can talk. But I graduated during COVID. So my senior year was COVID, and I had went for home for spring break. They called us and they were like, hey, in about a month, this is your alphabetical day to come move your stuff out. So had 2 jobs in Mobile. I graduated with a comm degree. So both of those fell through.
Yeah.
And I was looking, I was like, I have no clue what I want to do. Like, I know I love sports, I love coaching, but I didn't want to teach. But I'm here. Wrong. But so I knew I wanted to do something with sports, but I also grew up, as corny as this sounds, I grew up watching a lot of like NCIS, Covert Affairs. My mom and I loved that show. If you haven't seen that show, it's where a female, she gets recruited by the CIA and then she goes undercover and she lives like this double life. So her family doesn't know, but she's like solving crime and across the world.
Yeah.
So my dad has a really good friend that works for the government, and he was like, literally, he's like, just go on USA Jobs, look, see what you find, and apply. And I'm like, really? I was like, because they make this seem a lot harder. I was like, what are we working for here? Because I'm like, something doesn't add up. So I looked and I was like, okay. I was like, I'll just apply for like 2 or 3 things. So I applied for 2 jobs, one with the CIA, one with the Secret Service, and then one with FBI. And I thought, this is not going to go anywhere. Like,
ooh, you went FBI too?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I submitted my applications and I was like, there's no way. I just graduated from college. I played college volleyball. Like, I'm athletic, but I was like, there is absolutely a few weeks later, I get an email and it's like, hey, we want you in for an interview. And I was like, hello? I was like, this is insane.
Me?
I was like, yeah.
You want me?
And well, okay. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was looking through before I applied, I was like, a secret there was like special agent job. And I was like, oh, not them calling me Special Agent Harris. I was like, that's crazy. So I was like, and that's even more, I was like, there's no way it's gonna happen. So anyway, I applied. I took a test, had to take a test. I passed it online. And then I had 2 interviews, like panel interviews. And I'm not gonna lie, when I walked in, there was like this panel full of men who were just like 100% were military or police. And I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I don't need to be in here.
Not my place.
But the interviews went well. And I ended up actually doing a polygraph, which is a lie detector test. And that was the 3rd step, I think, maybe the 4th one. So it was 3rd. So I go in. If you've never seen this, it literally is. It's like the accordion cord, right? It's like,
yeah.
And they strap it around. Yep. Strap it around you. I had to sit, I had heels on, I had to take my heels off. My feet are like on sensors. I'm sitting like straight up like this. And my arm is on the table. They have like sweat sensor pads on your fingers, like my hand, and I like can't move. And so the entire interview was like 3 hours, but it was in little increments. So he would ask you some questions and then you had a break and then you would come for 5 minutes and come back. And then, so just questions, obviously, that you would get, like, have you ever, partaken in illegal substances? Have you ever broken the law? Like that kind of stuff. But then there were a few just to see how psychology, like how you would actually work. One he asked looks at me and is like, have you ever lied to anyone you loved? I'm like, oh,
You're like, sorry, Mom, I don't like your food.
I sat there and I thought, how many times have I told somebody at a family reunion that I had no clue who they were and be like, oh, I love you. And I'm like, I don't know you. I was like, so I started really kind of internally freaking out a little bit. But so there's like random questions like that. The thing is the test can't judge necessarily your subconscious.
Yeah.
Right,
No,
so-
that's the thing is like, how do they really?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's really based off of the way that your body reacts.
Yeah.
So if I start sweating, if I start like freaking out, if I like try to move around,
Mhm.
but long story short, I made it through the interview. And then the guy starts asking me questions, and it was just kind of a little bit like, honestly, if you've seen it in the movies where they like walk up and they're like, so you did this. And I'm like,
No.
Interrogation.
yeah, it was really, I started freaking out. I thought, okay, maybe I really like don't know if this is where I need to be. But I passed the polygraph, and then I talked to the guy afterwards, and a week or so later, I thought, I don't really know that this is something. It was going to be a whole lot of moving around. You go through, they have stages. So first 2 years, you work in a field office where they place you. And then the next section of your life is kind of determined by where they place you. So
Yeah.
Secret Service covers obviously that the black suits and the glasses, and you're following around presidents and
Yes.
politicians. They also work overseas, at obviously at different embassies, stuff like that. But really, it's just kind of where they put you.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I love people too much. Like I love relationships too much. Like I want to be able to have,
Control of your own schedule.
exactly. And I'm super close with my family. I have a nephew that just turned 2. And so I thought, I don't want to be away from that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I ended up getting an email, and they were like, all right, you've been removed, whatever. And I thought, that's perfectly fine with me, because it's, not necessarily where I should have been. But it was a really fun
Really
experience.
A really fun
Yeah.
experience to tell people too.
Exactly. A little
Yeah.
party trick.
Yeah, I know. I'm sitting there, I'm like, if you got a polygraph, I'll take it and I'll pass.
Mm-hmm.
But
Been there, done that.
Yeah, literally check it off of my bucket list.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
but yeah, so it was
Oh.
interesting, but gives you a little bit of insight too, and into that side of things. It's definitely not a field.
And I bet it
good.
kind of like switched your mentality just a little bit of like everything that you got to do, just
Mhm.
kind of like flipping the switch.
Correct. It was very much when I actually told my mom about a year after that experience. I was like, I don't think that I realized how much that actually impacted and how much it impacted me.
Yeah.
Right. Like that experience, but specifically the polygraph, right? Like I've never been in a situation where I had to, explain and or defend myself, or, somebody saying, hey, are you sure about this? And I'm like, I don't.
I hope so.
Right. So I really didn't see how it affected me, until about a year or so after, but I learned a lot about myself through that. And so even ways I'm sure that I have not realized.
Still
about.
like,
Yeah.
still yet to be discovered.
Mhm.
How do you bring that, like what you learned into your coaching style?
Oh Lord. So my coaching style, I have played for a lot of different coaches. I played tons of sports growing up. I've played for coaches that, yell and scream, and I've played for coaches who are more reserved and who don't speak a lot. But one thing for me, I think my biggest number one priority in coaching, and sometimes this gets lost, just the other day we played area super high intensity, and I talked to my girls yesterday, and I was like, I need to apologize, I didn't handle some situations correctly, and I'm still learning, right?
Of course,
I'm
yeah.
26. This is
Of
my
course,
second
yeah.
head coaching job, and but they have had a ton of grace for me in that, and I've learned a ton from them. But the number one priority for me, and I've said this since I started coaching, right? Like when I first started, I did club ball, right? So I did 15, 16s, and then I worked with a 12-year-old club team. There were 13s this year. And I want them to know why, right? Like I want you to know why. I think so many times, especially when you're younger, like when you're forming habits in elementary school and middle school, coaches tell kids, do this, do this, do this. And so the kids do it. And then as you get older and the game changes, it becomes faster. People are there. The people on the other side of the net are getting better. You're getting better, but sometimes you don't know why. Like,
Yeah.
I'll tell my girls all the time, I'll say, hey, you're supposed to be here. And immediately, and I think it's because of my personality, like I want to understand. And so I tell them this too. I'm like, so sometimes I probably talk too much, but it's a huge priority for me to continue to coach you. Like I'm not ever going to yell at you or get frustrated and then not fix. Right.
Yeah.
And so I want them to know exactly why they're doing what they're doing. So I have never thought about the polygraph situation and how that has impacted.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think me being confident in what I know
Mhm.
to share with someone else, right? And then there's no like I don't have any question about what I'm explaining to you. And so
Exactly.
honestly, Faith, that's good. I have never thought about that. Really, that probably has because for me, like I don't want to say, hey, if I'm coaching, I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, Faith, you're going to move here and here, and then you do it, but then you don't know why you did it.
Exactly.
Right?
And then I don't know for the next time.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I think that probably just the basic understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing, because if I know, it's kind of like I have ownership over that, right?
Exactly.
So if I teach you and I coach you, then you have ownership over it. And
Yeah.
I think that it's carries a different weight when you are confident and when you know you're doing or what you're doing or why you're doing it, as opposed to somebody else just telling you.
Oh, I completely agree. I'm
Yeah.
such like a I have to do it to
Mhm.
know it learner. Like if someone's explaining a math problem to me, I'm never ever going to understand unless I am literally writing it
out.
down.
I'm the same way. Somebody
yeah.
can read something to me.
Yes.
I'm like,
Go in one ear and not the other.
I'll say, you'll have to give me the paper. I need to read it. Like, I
read it
can't.
myself. Yeah. But like kind of falling back to that of like the one-on-one coaching, like how do you develop that connection to where players are confident to be like, hey, like Coach Harris, like help me out. I don't know what I'm doing here. Or like just being confident to play in that space.
So, okay, so a few different ways. For me in this job, right? I got
Mhm.
hired in May, and off season for volleyball had already kind of passed, and then we led into summer, which June we have some practices, but really volleyball like leading up to season starts in July, and so I didn't have a ton of time
Yeah.
right with the girls, and I think that has that's been very very difficult for me and for them both because the way that I coach is a little bit different than maybe what they're used to, or maybe they're like they're receiving coaching on
Mhm.
specific details that they haven't been before, or it's a different way, and so. I said this from the beginning, like I want the kid to know that like I care, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of everybody says that, as cliche as it sounds, volleyball is going to be over at some point,
Yeah.
right? Like I want you to leave me knowing that you've learned something about accountability, about discipline, about
Yeah.
something that can carry on even if you're not playing volleyball. And so I think the biggest roadblock for me has been the time situation, but I think that the girls, this group especially, has been very good about being gracious with me. And honestly, like I know you came in the other day, like during SOAR,
Mhm.
they're in my room, and I have everybody keeps telling me I'm preppy, and I'm like, I was like, I'm young, but I'm like, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? But my classroom, I have
Just welcoming.
I have string
It's
lights
very welcoming. Yeah.
and I leave my lights off. And so during SOAR, they'll come in like, and some volleyball players, some not. Some kids that are in their friend group from out. I've got kids who are not even, they don't even communicate with some other kids that are in there. But for me, I think that growing up, it was very important that if I saw a kid at the lunchroom table that was by themselves,
Yeah.
I'm going. Like,
Yeah.
I know so much what it feels like to be the kid that's
Mhm.
like, that's left out, or the kid that's like intentionally, and so I don't want anybody to ever feel that way if I'm around. And so creating a space that is like an environment in which someone says, I don't know why, but I just feel like I can just go sit. Like
Yeah.
that's what's important to me. And I don't care if that kid is in the band. I don't care if that kid is the valedictorian. It doesn't matter. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that my mother has actually influenced that very well. And my father as well, my dad grew up saying everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time, same way you do.
Yeah.
And so breaking the barrier of stereotypes is something that's really big for me, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to be valued,
And
right?
differences
Yeah.
are beautiful. So
If we weren't different, then the world wouldn't be what it is, right?
Mhm.
I wouldn't learn. You wouldn't
Exactly.
learn. If we were all the same, that would be extremely boring.
Yeah,
And so
very. Yeah, me too.
have y'all seen the movie? Have y'all seen the movie The Uglies?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, yes. I
Okay.
actually watched that like 2 nights ago.
Okay, I saw that a few weeks ago, and I thought, man, I was like, that is if we had what we wanted, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You wouldn't know how to deal with
With it.
differences,
Yeah.
right? And so anyway, I think I got off track, but long story short, I want my players, I want my kids that I teach to know that I care.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Awesome. Yeah. And that's the whole heart of like coaching, you know,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
making sure that they know that you care. You know what I mean? So,
Fair.
but yeah. And then leading back to like your coaching style, how do you deal with success and failures? I know there's a couple tactics you use when stuff doesn't go
You know,
right.
my girls, they'll watch this and they'll say she doesn't deal with that well. I don't love failure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a very like high level of expectations, and sometimes that is not fair. And so I'm learning, you know, in my mind, I'm like, nothing is ever, we have to get here for it to be successful.
And nothing's going to stop us.
Exactly. And I think that I'm constantly, even after a win, like I'm trying to figure out, okay, but we missed here, here, and here. How do we fix that?
Yeah.
And so again, like I said, I know some of the girls are watching this and like, she doesn't deal with failure well. I don't love it because in my mind,
Love y'all,
I
don't
have
worry.
seen, no, I do, but they know.
Yeah.
It's because they know that I know
Care
they can
so
do
much.
and they can do better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I
So
told
much
them that
more.
yesterday. They are so much more capable. And so I it's constantly getting better,
Yeah.
right? Like it's
And sometimes you got to be the voice too, like to bring out what they don't see inside themselves. Like,
Yeah.
hey, girl, like you don't realize how good you are. But if you would just hone in on this skill
Right.
or this
And
thing,
turn it
or
up just a
pay
little bit more.
a little bit more
Well,
attention when this happens.
the most important thing with that though is making sure that I'm approaching each kid the way that they need to be approached.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've got some girls on the team that I know I don't have to motivate a lot, right?
Yeah.
All I need to say is like, hey, do this, this, and this. And it gets done. And then there are some that maybe I have to take a softer approach.
Yeah.
And then there are some that I look at and I'm like, don't let this happen. Like, for example, I'll use her as an example. Allie Ross, she's playing middle and we were in a really intense game. And I looked at her, I think they were coming out of a timeout and they're on the floor. And I yelled at her and she ran over and I grabbed her by the arm and I said, do not let a ball cross the net when you're up there. And she looked at me and she said, yes, ma'am. And the next like 2 or 3 balls that came from the other side, she either blocked it or had a touch. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So that I know I can have that conversation with Allie. Okay.
Exactly.
Then Anaya Patel, for example, I know I can pull Anaya over and be like, hey, she's not gonna get a kill on you. Like I need you here and I need you passing the ball. And she'll look at me and be like, done.
Yeah.
And so they're just, you know, it's just like in life, right? You have some friends that are different than other friends and you have acquaintances that are different than others, right? But you have to know how to communicate with them in an effective way.
Exactly.
I don't always do that well. None of us always do that well. But I think dealing with that, looking like success and failure, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's not necessarily putting a stamp of like, oh, I failed here. It's like, okay, in my mind, that's what I want to say. That's how I want to like.
But how can I grow from this?
And I can,
Yeah.
So instead, I have, this year has taught me a lot of like, Kayla Coley tells me this all the time. It's like, you're building, right? You're learning them, they're learning you. It's not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so trying to shift my perspective of this is not failure. This is a learning experience. It's a stepping stone.
And looking at the long-term goal. Yeah. Because like you just started. And so it's like you are like now this is your program. You're building it new, you know? And so like you said, they have to get used to your coaching style and they have to get used to like your things that you implement, you know? Because like you said, every coach is different.
Yes. And as time, I say time changes. I'm not old, but there are some aspects of the game that have shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
Like passing, you know, I see passing, they've been coached to pass a little bit different. And so I'm learning from them, like just as much as they're learning from me.
Exactly.
And so honestly, really cool to integrate the two. But like passing, for example, I would rather them pass if they can get their body around it. It makes more sense. Well, a lot of them are passing at angles.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm learning angles are great. You can use angles, but we still have to move our feet. And so like integrating the two, especially because the age they're at now, there are a lot of habits. If I see habits, they're not going to be broken.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But they're open and willing to listen to at least try to shift and adjust, which has been really, really good to see.
Exactly.
So
Have you always known that you wanted to be a coach?
I always knew I wanted to do something involving sports. Didn't know that it would be coaching, honestly. Didn't really at all think it was going to be teaching. I did elementary PE for 2 years. This is my like shift to high school,
Mhm.
teaching wise. And when I look back, like all of the coaches that I've had have impacted me in some way, right? Some ways where I'm like, okay, as a coach now, looking back, I love that they did this and this. I don't love that they did this.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of cool to look back at the coaches that I've had to kind of piece together. I had a situation a few weeks ago, and I was talking to my mom, and she said to me, she was like, well, what would Coach Tinker do? And I'm like, well, he would do this. And she was like, okay, what would Coach Wright do? I'm like, well, she would do this. And she was like, okay, so what do you want to do? And so
Mhm.
looking at it from that perspective, I think that to some extent, I've always had like a love for teaching, but my mind works in such a sports way,
Mhm.
right? That I knew that if I was going to teach, then that would be the way it would be. So initially didn't know that, but now looking back, I'm like, everything kind of has worked out to where that was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah,
from the
and
jump.
like kind of feeding off of your mind just works in a sports way. I saw you at the homecoming basketball game, absolutely juking up some guys.
Yes.
Holy crap!
Yeah. I grew up playing
Uh-huh.
basketball, playing outside with my brothers. I have two older brothers, and
Ooh, I bet that gets competitive.
yeah.
Fun.
Well, what was more so, I think honestly with basketball, I went to church, we had this youth group, and I would always play with the guys, and I would never forget my mom was like, you need to be careful, like you're gonna get hurt. They're not gonna, but I think that honestly that made me tougher at the end of the
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really know that I was going to play in the basketball game, but then some of the guys that were coaches that were playing were like, yeah, we're dying. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll play. And then I thought, I make a better granny free 3-pointer than an actual one.
No, you made
Yeah.
one in the homecoming game.
I
Yeah,
know.
like, from
almost half court.
My
That was-
gosh.
I would say
It was
I
like
would say
nothing
that's
but
skill, but it was kind of some luck a little bit. But I do shoot those
Everybody
better
went
than normal ones.
crazy. Everybody went crazy.
Yeah, that was
Oh my
fun.
gosh.
So
I bet that was a blast. Well, how do you deal with like being a multi-sport athlete while being in high school and everything?
yeah, biggest thing I can tell you is that you will not hear me say. Anybody that listens will not hear me say, but time management
Yeah.
Yes.
is huge.
I struggle with that.
It
one.
is,
Me too.
and also you want to hang out with your friends, right?
Mhm.
But I think that the phone is what
Mhm.
messes a lot of people up, right?
Yeah.
I think that because it's like, oh, well, I can go hang out with my friends. Trying to make the differentiation between hanging out with my friends and doing my homework. Doing my homework as opposed to hanging out with friends. Homework is smarter choice. But if I try to argue with myself and say, oh, well, I can just finish this conversation. I can just like check this Instagram post. I can just send this Snapchat.
You're in that loophole.
Yeah. So then you get sucked in, which is what the phones do, right? That's what
Yeah.
social media does. And so for me, I didn't have to, social media wasn't as huge when I was in school, but I played club volleyball my last 2 years of high school in Birmingham. And so I would go to school, I'd have basketball practice because it was basketball season. And then I would drive to Birmingham, have volleyball practice, and get home. And it was like, okay, when do I do homework? And so honestly, it was picking and choosing both of these choices are good choices, but what is the best choice? What is the
what's the
smartest
best-
choice?
Yeah.
Choice to make. And so I would say you actually have to look at it from your parents' perspective in a logical way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, school is more important than athletics is. But
And I kind of want to ask, this is like off topic, but like when you go to college, like I've heard like a lot of colleges claim like you're a student athlete, but
Mhm.
like sometimes it's like the opposite, like you're an athlete before you're
Yeah.
a student. Like, was that kind of like
yeah,
your
it's
college experience?
I think anybody can say this
Yeah.
as well. It's a job. Like,
Yeah.
when you play sport in college, it's a job. I went to an NAI school. It was a private Christian college in Mobile, University of Mobile. And my class sizes were smaller.
Mhm.
And so it was easier to learn and actually engage
Yeah.
with other students and with my professors. So I think that helped a lot. My brother went to University of Alabama. My other brother went to UAB. But my brother that went to Alabama ran track and cross country.
Whoa.
And so it was the same for him, right? Like he's
Yeah.
training all the time and he's like, when do I do my work?
Yeah.
And it does become, because it is a job, it takes priority over your academics sometimes. But my personal experience, because I went to a smaller school, I had more of a personal relationship, right? So if there was a due date coming up and I knew that I was going to be out of town for volleyball for the last half of the week, I would communicate with my professor and be like, "Hey, I this is almost done, or can I have an extension?" And being honestly, being open and just like completely candid with your professor is something for me that worked a lot because they do know you have a lot on your plate, right? And don't not to abuse that, right? Like get your stuff done, but at the same time, as long as they see that you're putting forth effort, you're trying to get things done, because again, it's a job, and they realize that as well. Honestly, it's all about where you go to school, what sport you're playing, things like that. But most colleges do have like athletic academic advisors that will help specifically to
Did you want
athletes.
to go to like a smaller school, or did you want to like go to a bigger school?
I'm not very tall. On paper, I was 5'9". I'm about 5'8". And I played outside, so I was 6 rotations. I'm really strong, so I hit the ball very hard, but it doesn't matter when you're going up against a girl that's like 6'3", and then her arm. But that's before she like extends her arms and jumps. And so
I've got you on that part.
Look, I'm serious. I went on a visit to a school, a D2 school, and I jumped up to hit the ball, and I'm just thinking, oh, I'm about to kill this thing. And I go up and I hit it, and it comes right back down on me. And I looked around and I thought, oh my goodness, I am embarrassed.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's D2. And I knew that if I went to D2, small D1, I wasn't going to be able to hit. I was going to have to play defense. And I wanted to hit. Yeah. And so I also think that the Lord worked that out, because my personality, I already mentioned this, I love relationships. And I don't believe that if I would have gone anywhere else other than where I went, that I would have formed relationships and learned as much as I did.
Exactly.
About myself, about other people, just in general. And so I did want to go to a little bit larger of a school as far as like athletics goes. But I knew I always wanted to play something.
Yeah.
Like I knew I wanted to play volleyball or basketball or something in college. And so that's just kind of how it worked out. And I, now looking back, I'm like grateful that that's the way it occurred.
Yeah, that's nice.
But when you're in school, everybody wants the big offers. You want to be able to tell people, and it really
going D1. Yeah.
Truthfully, it doesn't matter, right? Like people care, but nobody cares more than you care.
Yeah.
And so when you go to college, regardless of what size, what sport, everybody that's on that team, they're the best where they're from.
Yeah.
You might be the best where you're from, but they're the best where they're from. And so you get there and you kind of have a humbling experience, regardless of what you do, where you go, what size. Everybody is the best where they come from. And so trying to manage that, nobody cares as much as you care.
Yeah. And to your point about nobody cares as much as you care, I remember like just being stuck on like, well, I just got to accomplish this, this, and this, so everybody will know that I'm like legit. You know what I mean? But it's like, okay, they're going to know you're legit for that one Instagram post that you post for a matter of 30 seconds.
Correct.
Oh, that's cool. And then move on and you're out of their head.
And to the next. They're going to the next.
Exactly.
And I think it does have a lot to do with social media and attention span. And everybody wants to be connected, but they want to be connected through a phone because it's on their terms.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so being connected personally, in person, is a lot different than being connected over the phone, because if I'm having a conversation with you, I can run away. I can't, if I wanted to, I could run away.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
get out of the chair and go.
No. But like, if I did, I could, right?
Yeah.
But that's just awkward. But if I'm texting you and I don't really care to respond, what can I do? I can ghost you and I'm done. Yeah. And then when I see you in person, it's a little bit awkward, but it isn't as much of a embarrassment, painful feeling as
exactly.
And so I think that sometimes we struggle a lot as a society. I sound like a old person.
Well, philanthropist over here.
We do struggle, I think, a lot with connection, right?
Yeah.
And with genuine connection. And so our parents, not as much, but just because of technology and social media and interactions are just different. And so to your point, they did care about that social media post you made. They did.
Yeah.
But they're not going to care again until you make another one.
Exactly.
And so then you get stuck in a loop of, well, I have to do this and I have to do this. And you're not doing anything for yourself. You're doing it for
others' validation.
Exactly.
So, oh my gosh, you couldn't have said that better. Because how many times do we just like go on Instagram too and be like, all right, how many likes did I get? How many views did I get?
And honestly, regardless of how many you get, it's never going to be enough. Like,
Exactly.
it's kind of like one
Yeah.
of those things where you're trying to fill yourself. You're filling yourself with all this like, admiration and
Mhm.
affirmation from other people, and
Yes.
you're not ever going to actually feel full.
I
So-
completely agree with that. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much on all your advice and
Yes.
stuff. Oh my gosh,
Thanks.
little philanthropist.
I
over here.
know.
I try. Sometimes I'll tell my girls stuff and I'm like, I promise I've been through a lot more than you realize. I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not always right.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, I will own it and I'll admit it. But at the same time, I think that I do believe that there are situations that you go through in your life. And my personal opinion, I believe that the Lord places you where he wants you.
Mhm.
And I believe that I've gone through things that I can help other people learn
Yeah, I agree.
from. And so again,
So well.
if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, I'll admit it. But
yeah.
if anything I say can help somebody else and I feel like led to say it, then I will. So
Well, that's awesome. Well, just to end off on everything, what would be your advice to just the people walking throughout the school? Like, what is something like? Is it connection? Is it I don't know, just like being kinder to others? What's your kind of message?
I think the biggest thing is you need to be mindful,
Yeah.
right? I think just saying the word mindful, thinking of other people, right? You thinking of the way you're acting and interacting with others, your teachers. Be mindful of the way you treat your parents.
Yeah.
I think that if you actually sat and were reflective about your actions and your words, then that would probably change the way you work and act every single
Yeah.
day. So
Completely.
I say be mindful. Self-reflection, I now sound like a counselor, but super important.
She's everything above.
Yay.
Yes, counselor. Yeah.
Like Barbie.
Barbie? Is that
Oh,
what you say?
Yeah.
she's the new Barbie.
Thanks. I'm
Look at her
preppy.
go.
Apparently that's a good thing. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, we killed that, bro. That was awesome.
Yes, thank you.
It is exactly. Kennedy, I am so sorry. I looked directly in the camera. Okay.
I don't think I got it.
Hey, dude, that was so good.
I was looking at you because I couldn't hear out of my ears.
I genuinely enjoyed that conversation so much. That was so good.